person. No more Skype interviews and Skype recordings with my good friend and fellow host, Mike Guglielmi. Mike, welcome back from all your cross-country travels. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's been a heck of a month of spending a lot of time in Florida via plane and RV, work conferences and parents and friends. Lots of good times. It's been fun, but I'm glad to be back and talking soccer here in person with you, Nick, and with all of our listeners.
So did you scout out, like, Inter Miami's new facilities? Like, that structure's going up quick from what I hear.
It's going up real quick. I did not get a chance to get out there. I just figured I'd look at some photos online that everybody can look at, because I did not have a car when I was over in Miami. So, and I certainly wasn't going to drive the RV another 300 miles to go check it out from where I was at, because gas is expensive when you're driving an RV.
I can imagine, Mike. I've got my nice little Ford Escape that I putz around in, but I can imagine filling up the RV tank. Well, listeners, we want to thank you for joining our conversation week in and week out on the show, especially on Twitter at SOP Soccer or on Facebook at Sons of a Pitch Soccer. You can also jump in via email, podcast at sonsofapitchsoccer.com, or check us out on the website www.sonsofapitchsoccer.com. We want to thank Parceros Nashville at Los Parceros Nash, a new Nashville SC supporters group. I looked up what the word Parceros means in Spanish, and it is, I think, like friend or supporter or buddy or something like that. So these are friends in Nashville, loyal fans. It looks like there's a Colombian flag in their profile there. So good South American connection all the way to Nashville. So great to see them, and so for all our Spanish language listeners, check them out. As well as we want to thank Keisha Hancock at Keisha Hancock 18 for following us along, joining the discussion. And if you want to join, please spread the word. We've got about 250 Twitter followers right now, which, you know what, Mike, for 2 years of doing this, a couple every week, slowly growing the brand, slowly growing the podcast. Help us get to 300, and then we can bother you to help us to get to 400. So,
tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell everybody. Yeah, so, look, we also have lots of swag available. The sales keep on rolling in. We had a few more sales this week, so thank you to whoever you were that bought some T-shirts. We actually just had a hoodie purchased as well, so I think that's somebody up in the Great White North, either in Toronto or Minnesota or, New York, something, especially with all the snow we've been having up here. But sonsofapitch.redbubble.com. Get your Sons of a Pitch soccer swag. Help us continue to grow and have a really kick-ass shirt while you're at it. So make sure to check that out. Also, YouTube has been quiet. We've been putting up the podcast recording that we've been doing over Skype. We're going to have a live video of the both of us here talking some soccer today from the RV. In our awesome studio. So check the YouTube station out as well. Listeners, let us know what you want to hear about. If there's anything special you want to hear about, any niche, something that you want me to talk about on YouTube, let us know either on YouTube itself, email us, podcast at sonsofapitchsoccer.com, shoot us a DM on Twitter at SOP Soccer, and let us know. And I will make sure to get some content up there on YouTube. Just looking for that content, especially now with as slow as it's been with no games, no picks, predictions, recaps, things of that for the offseason.
Right. And that's a great segue, Mike. Good transition. Thank you for the setup.
Yeah, no problem.
We're working so well together. Into an email we got from one of our new fans, David Ruffin, who says, I just recently discovered your podcast and really enjoy it. I've made the transition from casual fan that only watched the World Cup and Olympic soccer to someone that is actively following club soccer, specifically MLS and the Premier League. Let me tell you, as a fan of both leagues, David, don't follow Everton. They will break your heart, as they have broken mine so many times. He goes on to say, as such, there's still a lot I don't understand, like how contracts work, what makes a good one or a bad one, the different positions, etc. So fans, if you have any resources that you want to share with us, hit us up on Twitter. That way, David, you can follow along. You can see the resources, maybe websites, people you follow. That would be great for him to be able to expand his knowledge of the game. Again, tag us on Twitter at SOP Soccer. But David, we want to address your first question about what makes a good contract or what makes a bad contract. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we think makes those qualities, and then we're going to go right into the re-entry draft and see maybe these MLS teams got some good deals on a few of these players. So, Mike, TFC had done a lot of business. That's your team. And
Yeah.
there's been a lot of business around the league lately. What, in your mind, makes a good contract or a bad contract?
So I have to preface it a little bit with kind of the understanding of it, especially in MLS, and what makes it different from all the other leagues in the world. And main listeners that are extremely knowledgeable on this, it's kind of repeating ourselves, and this might be stuff you already know. But in MLS, there's the salary cap. There's a specific amount of money that these teams can pay out in salaries. And there's different little things such as DP, TAM, GAM, all these different acronyms for how you can spend money and how these signings and contracts actually work. Now, those all come into play when we're talking about a good contract or a bad contract, especially in the world of MLS. So, in MLS, you've got good contracts where you're getting good value out of that salary. So you might have a guy who's a younger player, doesn't have a ton of experience, but he's kind of up and coming, and you get him at a good low salary. You might also have a good contract at the DP level where you're getting a guy for maybe 1.8, 2 million in salary, but it only counts for 550 or 575,000 towards the salary cap. So as well, with paying a contract down with TAM, maybe you're getting a player who's worth that DP spot of 1.5 to 2.5 million, but you're paying them down with TAM in order to only have 5 or 300,000 or whatever of that money count towards the actual salary cap. So it really just depends. There's so many different factors. You have age, you have, the amount of money that player is making, how their contract is being paid down, if it's being paid down at all. So it's very, very tricky in the world of MLS. When you talk about something like Premier League, it's all about performance, right? That's
Right.
all that matters.
And these mega ownership groups in these international leagues, it's no big deal if they drop 20, 30, 40 million dollars on a player that turns out to be a bust, because they've got, this is their tax write-off of their business conglomerate. If their team, I think every sports team is profitable, but none of them actually make money. Isn't that
Right.
it, Mike? You're the accountant. You know what I'm
Most of
talking
them,
about.
most of them,
Yeah.
yes.
So if these international teams with mega ownership groups or billionaire oil, conglomerates throwing money around, if they lose 20, 30 million, no big deal. These MLS teams, if they don't hit on one of their top paid players, that can set them back from a financial standpoint for a couple of years.
Absolutely. So really, your bad contracts and good contracts all obviously come down to performance. If a player is not performing, regardless how much of a salary hit they are or how much you're paying for them, it's a bad contract. That's just common sense.
Mhm.
But when it comes to MLS and you have a guy who's outperforming the money he's making, and you've got him for another 2 years at $200,000, but he's playing like a DP,
Right.
that's a good contract. So it's kind of tricky to explain. You kind of just have to start to follow MLS, follow the details that you can learn about TAM,
Right.
GAM, that kind of stuff, to really understand it, and it just takes time.
Yeah.
That's all.
And because the league is a single private entity and the teams are actually franchises, we don't actually get a lot of these details
Right.
disclosed, which, I mean, they do come out through various internal sources that get leaked, and media reporting or players association type stuff, but typically the league isn't releasing that information.
Yep, exactly.
For me, what makes a good, it's value. It's about value. Yeah, on the field performance is a big part of that, but if you look at Atlanta United, they invested in a lot of these South American players with the intent to sell them. If
Right.
they win them titles in the meantime, perfect. And that's exactly what happened when you had Almiron and Martinez last year propelling Atlanta United to the Cup final. And then they pick up Barco. They've got LGP, Luis Gonzalez Perez. I mean, they've got guys who are, you're absolutely right, Mike, outperforming their worth, but they snatched them up early. and they were able to have them for a year or two, prove themselves in the MLS, and then in the case of Miguel Almiron, flip him to Newcastle United of the Premier League. Again, not saying you should support Newcastle, David. Not saying that at all. But flipping him and then getting a huge return on it. So that is, from a business sense, I think what a lot of teams are looking at for young players that they're developing, homegrown players that are coming through their academies, or the re-entry draft. You know, all these other mechanisms that you can acquire players through the super draft, through the re-entry draft, waivers, you name it. Some of these other things that the MLS has put in place to get players, homegrowns, discovery rights, where you're the first person to kind of lay claim to some newly discovered player. Even though the Chicago Fire did a really good job with that for the former Spanish national team player whose name escapes me. I picture the guy right now. But like, he was this big star for Spain's national team, but the Fire still laid claim to his like discovery rights because they were the first one to go contact him. It's kind of a good way to use a loophole in the system from a couple of years back.
Yeah.
So let's look at the re-entry draft and see how these teams found some value, how they had some good contracts. Obviously, Mike, a bad contract is one where you overpay and they underperform.
Right.
And I think also a bad contract would be someone who takes up one of your 3 designated player spots and isn't performing. Would you say, Mr. TFC, before we get into the re-entry draft, you know where I'm going with this question
I know
already.
exactly where you're
Because
going.
you know my feelings on Josie Altidore. Was Josie taking up a high-paying designated player spot this past year a good contract or a bad contract?
It's a bad contract. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. Check out the back feed of episodes. I believe it was 2 episodes ago. We talked about it. I mean, this was when he was a free agent. He came over as a DP in the beginning of 2015, I believe it was. And at that point, that was a good contract. He played it out well. They won an MLS Cup. That was a good contract. But then when he's coming to re-sign, he's only playing 15 games a year out of a 34-game schedule.
Yeah.
And, you can't utilize one of these DP spots on a guy who's not going to play as much. Even if he does perform when he's there, look at their run here in the playoffs. They didn't have him. They made it all the way to MLS Cup final. Now, he did come in off the bench in like the 60th minute in MLS Cup final and then ended up scoring a goal, although Seattle was completely in celebration mode at that point.
Oh, yeah.
And that goal wouldn't have happened if it was 0-0 or even 1-0.
That was
maybe even
that was just a
2-0.
favor to a respected opponent.
That was they were thinking about lifting that cup. They weren't
Yeah.
even thinking about playing that game at that point. So, speaking about lifting cups, YouTube viewers.
Cheers, yeah.
So, it's a bad contract right now. He probably should have come back at TAM. Check out, we talked about it in more depth.
How about, I think it's so much easier to look at a designated player contract and say these are bad contracts because it's just the amount of money you're throwing at them, and there's only three available. Like, would you say Zlatan was a bad contract for the Galaxy? I mean, between his almost MVP season, but yet them not winning the playoff game? Like, I don't know. Bad contract, good contract? Other things going on in LA? I mean...
Yeah, no, I would still say it's a good contract. I mean, the guy came in, he sold a lot of shirts. He brought a lot of attention to the games just because of his name and his asshole-ish personality. But,
Hey, there's kids here, Mike. Come on. hey, we got some kids.
So, anyway.
Shout out to our Seattle fans on the way to soccer practice. Listening to this.
But no, it's a good contract overall. He did perform while he was here. He scored goals. He played a good amount of games. He missed some. But, he was playing. He was performing. Did the team as a whole, was that successful at that point? If you judge a contract based off of MLS Cups won or trophies won, you can't do that because it's just too small of a percentage that actually get that done. So I think it's a good contract.
Then let's look at Sporting Kansas City. I saw a tweet out earlier, and I'm sorry I can't remember who to give credit to, but they said over the last several years, I think since Peter Vermees, their head coach, and also is their sporting director or technically something like that. He holds an executive title within the organization. Since he took that title over, they've only spent like $4 million in transfers in like the last 4 years maybe. I feel like he's getting a lot of good contracts because there's a lot of value. his team's always competitive. I mean, heck, we picked them to compete for trophies this past season, and yeah, that came back to bite us. But if you know our track record of picks, you're not surprised.
Right.
But like, it seems like a team like Sporting Kansas City or the Houston Dynamo, or I don't know, in the Eastern Conference, I'm trying to think of a comparable team, maybe the Red Bulls or DC United, who aren't dropping tons of cash, signing giant players, Wayne Rooney being the exception here. I feel like they're getting a lot of value out of their players and have a lot of good contracts.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got a good contract from that standpoint. But sometimes you have to take some risks in order to be extremely successful.
Yeah. And you know, these teams that I just mentioned, what's the biggest criticism? Well, they're just that one player away from making a real good run. Like, yeah, so maybe they do need to go out and take that risk and spend some money. Kansas City knows what I'm talking about. DC, you know, who's the number 2 to Rooney, or now who's going to take Rooney's place since he's gone and Acosta's future is up in the air. You know, take those risks. Like, maybe if the Red Bulls maybe would have dropped $10 million on a DP, maybe they'd have actually lifted a cup instead of just getting a lot of points in the standings over the last several years.
Yeah.
So that's the criticism, and that's kind of our general take on good and bad contracts. But let's jump into the re-entry draft. What has been going on with the MLS lately? And I love this. Like, the season ends, MLS Cup. Congratulations, Seattle. Boom, we're right back in a player acquisition mode and team building. I love it. There's never an off season.
Right.
It's fantastic. So the re-entry draft is where teams can select players who are out of contract or whose contract options were declined by their last clubs in the re-entry draft. So essentially, you're unrestricted free agents. Let's kind of put it in more familiar American sports terms. We'll put it out that way.
But they're not free agents.
Not free agents. The one other catch. That's what I wanted to say. The one other catch to this is teams cannot select their own players. So if you're not going to pick up your own guys' options, it's not like you can go back and get them at a better deal all of a sudden.
Right.
Maybe you can do that in the waiver draft, but not re-entry.
Yeah.
So this year's re-entry draft, it's 2 rounds. Just had the second round.
Today.
Was it today?
Yep.
Tuesday the 3rd.
Yep.
So I'm just going to run down. They've got the list. Thank you, Wikipedia, and all you Wikipedia people out there. This is a solid internet community here with the MLS, Mike. We're up to date on this stuff. Yeah. So we're just going to run down the list the way Wikipedia presents it, you know, by club alphabetically. So the first guy up is Mikey Ambrose of Atlanta United, and he got picked up by Inter Miami in stage 1 of the re-entry draft. Mike, what do you know about Mikey Ambrose? What do you think he can do for Inter Miami Club Internacional Football? What's he going to do for Miami, Mike? What's he going to do?
Maybe be a depth piece. I really don't know much about Mikey Ambrose. He hasn't had a ton of playing time in Atlanta, so I don't really know. He's kind of a USL guy, floating through USL, breaking in with Atlanta over the past couple seasons, few appearances here and there. He did get a couple caps for United States youth squads back in late 2000s, early 2010s. But one thing I want to explain to our listeners first is the re-entry draft and how it works is your first stage. You've got, these are players that you can pick up, but you have to sign them at their option amount. So whatever option was declined by that club, you have to pay at that price. So say Mikey Ambrose, say his option was $200,000 for his, and I have no idea what it is, so don't quote me on that price. But say it's $200,000. When Inter Miami picked him up with that first pick, they have to pay him that $200,000 option.
Do you know, is it that option or at least that option?
Well, would you pay any more?
From a business standpoint, no, but I don't know if you want to lock a guy up.
Right. I mean, if you want to extend them, right? If this is somebody you really like, sure, you can keep them at this salary for this year and then extend them 2 or 3 years down the road.
Yeah.
But the difference between stage 1 and stage 2 is now the stage 2, you can negotiate a contract with them as long as it's fair. So obviously,
who decides what's fair, Mike?
MLS is going to decide that,
right?
But
listeners, this is what's great about having me, the lawyer, and Mike, the accountant, at the table.
Exactly.
You get into these, I like the gray area, and he likes the hard facts.
Yeah, exactly. exactly. So it has to be a reasonable contract. Which again, how do you define that? But obviously, it makes sense, right?
Well,
Somebody who gets
reasonable is
picked up-
whatever is in favor of your client.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Lawyer.
Yep, that's me.
So,
That's me.
so that's the main difference. So that's why a lot of these teams are passing in round 1 and hope that guy slips to round 2 so that they can get him at a lower salary to pick up a good contract, like we were talking about before, and help that salary cap structure out for their club.
Yeah, and you'll see a lot of players who were eligible in the first round ended up getting withdrawn. I'm assuming because their respective teams then were able to renegotiate something, maybe not for what their option was, but at again what the team feels is a fair value, a reasonable value.
Right.
So yeah, it looks like Mikey Ambrose is going to be a good depth piece for Miami, spot starter if needed. He's only 26 years old. Looking at his career, he did play for Maryland in college, and that is one of
That's
the
a
top
good- yeah.
top college teams in NCAA. But you're right, Mike. He bounced between Atlanta and Orlando City, out on loan in some of the USL teams and whatnot. So probably more of a depth piece. The one thing I like most about Mikey Ambrose is he and I share a birthday.
Oh, isn't that
So
cute?
yeah, thanks, appreciate that. Yeah. So next October, Mikey, you'll be getting a message from me.
Oh,
Happy birthday! He'll be turning 27, and I won't be. I'm a little bit ahead of that. I wore my hat today for the YouTube viewers. You can't see all the grays that I got going on. So that's Mikey Ambrose. So good luck to him with Inter Miami. Stefan Cleveland. Stefan?
Stefan, let's go.
Cleveland. Stefan Cleveland. Sounds good. Of the Chicago Fire was traded to the Sounders. Mike, this is an re-entry draft day deal here. He's a goalie. Do the Seattles have a goalie problem? I think they've acquired a couple goalkeepers in this re-entry draft. Are they trying to create some competition?
Well, I
for
know
their
they
number
lost.
two?
They lost one in the expansion draft. So their backup
that's it.
got picked up by, I believe it was Nashville, in the re-entry draft or in the expansion draft. So that's filling that backup spot there.
Okay, so Stephen Cleveland of the Chicago Fire. I don't think he got many games.
No.
And Chicago fans, if you know anything about Cleveland, hit us up on Twitter at SOP Soccer. Let us know what your thoughts are. But he spent most of his time in Chicago out on loan to Tulsa or Lansing, some of the lower divisions of American soccer here. So maybe he just wasn't panning out the way they wanted to, or maybe new ownership wants to go in a different direction.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, Chicago has had a goalkeeping problem for a couple seasons between ousted Sanchez and I don't even remember who played before them because they're not worth remembering.
Right.
I'll
Yeah,
just
and
be
now-
blunt.
Kronholm in goal now
There you go.
for Chicago. So yeah, they've got so they it seemed like decent depth at the goalkeeping position, but yeah.
Speaking of Fire goalkeepers, Richard Sanchez was selected by Sporting Kansas City. Sporting Kansas City's got Tim Melia, one of the best goalkeepers year over year in the MLS. Is he approaching the end of his career? Do they think Richard Sanchez needs to come in and maybe compete for a starting spot with Tim Melia? Like,
I'm gonna go
what's
with no.
going on here, Mike?
I'm going to go with no. It's a re-entry draft pickup. Although in stage 1, I think that he's probably a backup over there for him, and maybe his option was cheap, and the Fire were just letting him go regardless. So
Yeah.
it's I can't see him challenging Tim Melia right now. Next year, maybe the year after that. I don't know, but Richard Sanchez is not your household name. This is not a guy who you're like, oh yeah, this is a huge pickup.
Now, Sanchez is only 25, so he is coming into the prime of his career, but
As a goalkeeper, which is usually a little bit older than regular, outfield players. But
but from what we saw in Chicago, he was not good. Now, I don't know if Kansas City's got a great goalkeeping coach that can maybe give him a little something to help improve his game, or backing up Tim Melia is going to improve his game, or hey, if Kansas City wants to compete for multiple trophies, do well in the Open Cup and do well in the regular season, they're going to need a guy who has been a starter in the league, So, like, it's if you're looking at it from that perspective, I see it's not a terrible pickup, but just, man, living in the Chicago area and watching Richard Sanchez on a weekly basis, and then have him lose out to a guy like David Ousted, and it's just, it's got to be just a depth move. I can't see it. If it works out, it works out.
I think they're maybe taking a flyer on him just based off of his potential. Looking at his past, he seems to have a little bit of potential just based off of the Mexican national youth teams, the appearances for them, as well as this guy was on the books at Tigres, youth player for Atletico Madrid. So maybe in their academy system a little bit. So those big name clubs, maybe they obviously saw something in this kid. So maybe they're just taking a flyer on this guy to say maybe he'll turn out that way. But there's a lot of maybes there.
Yeah.
And what we've seen from this guy isn't enough.
It's like in an NFL team for us American listeners, and here's a good comp, in my opinion. It's the backup quarterback, man. That's what this backup keeper is. That's what Richard Sanchez is becoming. He's just going around. People know he can come in a moment's notice and like be competent. He's a backup quarterback. He's the backup goalkeeper. To me, that's the comp here. Or that relief pitcher that has played on 8 different Major League Baseball teams in the last 8 years. Just bounces around. He'll give you the innings you need. That's Richard Sanchez. I think that's going to be his destiny at age 25. It's laid out for him. Anyway, let's keep it moving along here. The next couple of pickups. Your guys' TFC, Mike. This was to me actually the biggest move I think of the re-entry draft. Is TFC picking up Juan Agudelo? How do you feel about that as a guy who follows the league and as a TFC fan?
I like it. I'll be interested to see what he signs on for, and what that reasonable contract actually is for Juan Agudelo.
Yeah, he came in the second round, so they got to negotiate with him.
Right, they get to negotiate. So, look, he's got some talent. He's scored some good goals in MLS, a lot of goals in MLS. He's been around for a while. He came up with the Red Bulls in the youth system, which we all know their youth system's really good. And then he's bounced around and had a chance to go over to Stoke City and couldn't get a work permit through. Why, I have no idea. But came back to MLS. Right. He's been a stalwart for New England Revolution. He's always in that side, whether it's starting or off the bench. He's got a lot of goals. A good depth piece for TFC, who needs all the help they can get up front.
Juan Agudelo is an intriguing player to me, because as someone who's followed the U.S. men's national team and someone who's followed the MLS over the last several years, Juan Agudelo was billed as like the next big midfielder that the team was going to, forward. Like, he was supposed to be an attacking piece for the U.S. men's national team and for whatever MLS club. He was supposed to go to Stoke and revive their offense. He came back to New England and was supposed to be a goal scorer for them. But he hasn't lived up to the hype. I'm not going to fault anyone for not living up to the hype, because, American sports media.
Right.
Oh, everyone's the next Landon Donovan. Everyone's the next Michael Jordan.
Right.
I'm not going to fault Juan Agudelo for not living up to the hype. But if you're supposed to be the next big striker, and you've only got 28 goals and 144 appearances for the Revs, maybe you are going to be that depth piece. Maybe you are just going to be that solid career MLS player. It's disappointing because he had all the potential, like you said, coming up in the U.S. youth system, coming up in the Red Bulls Academy, who we know produces good MLS talent, if not great MLS talent and good talent, around the world. Like we saw Tyler Adams just do his thing over in the Bundesliga, So I kind of feel for Juan Agudelo a little bit, but at the same time, I wonder if TFC is going to use him as a starting striker, if he's going to be the replacement, or at least the placeholder for Josie Altidore's position until they can sign that 22-year-old next big thing.
Right. Look, you're taking a chance on a guy who had some potential. We just talked about it with Richard Sanchez. He's proven himself a little bit more than Richard Sanchez has, at least in MLS. Maybe the change of scenery, who knows? Maybe the guy comes out and scores 15 goals. in a season. If he does, it's a great contract, whatever they get him for. And it's worth taking a shot on a guy like that as a depth piece. Because you know what? Yeah, he'll probably just end up being a depth piece, score a few goals, 4, 5, 6 goals in the season. That's all they need.
And here's the other thing you got to think of. He's playing for Greg Vanney now. He's not playing for Bruce Arena or Brad Friedel or whoever New England's coach was before Friedel.
Stevie Nichols.
Stevie Nichols, there you go. He's not playing for these guys who probably didn't want him or didn't like him or didn't know how to use him. He's playing for Greg freaking Vanney, MLS Cup champion, 3-time MLS Cup appearance, Canadian championship. Like, Vanney's got an excellent
CONCACAF Coach of the Year.
There you go. Greg Vanney's got an excellent record, and he knows tactics and formations, and he knows how to switch his formations to get the most out of his players on any given week. So, I fully expect Juan Agudelo to have a resurgence north of the border, wearing TFC red. This guy could have a 10-goal season easily with TFC, especially if Josie isn't at 100%, which he never really is. If he can link up well with Pozuelo and Benazet, the TFC's most recent big signings.
If Benazet signs, he was a loan. The end of the loan. So whether or not they actually bring him back, that we don't know yet.
So I'm very high on this pickup by TFC. I think it's an excellent move, and it's too bad that the Revolution didn't have the business sense to sign him for something and then try and flip him.
Right.
Get something because they've just lost that asset with nothing in return.
For nothing, right?
Let's keep it rolling here, Mike. We are we're about at the half-hour mark of the show. Let's hit up a couple other quick picks, and we'll take a break and come back in the second half with some other headlines. So we've got Eric Miller, formerly of NYCFC, was selected by Nashville in Stage 1. He's a right back. He's a defender, outside back. Not a most in-demand position in the MLS, so it looks to be kind of a depth piece there. Kendall McIntosh, formerly of Portland, goes over to the Red Bulls in Stage 1. So I really think I'm getting
I've never even heard of this guy.
Yeah, getting a much more confirmation of my thoughts that, the entry draft is just to add depth. Maybe create some position or competition for a few positions. But McIntosh is a keeper. Apparently keepers are a hot commodity in the re-entry draft here.
Yeah.
So a good place to find some value in goalkeepers.
There's a guy that is on this list that, when you look at a re-entry draft, he withdrew prior to Stage 2. Okay, like Bradley Wright Phillips. Right? This guy, this is a guy where that's a big name. That's a good signing. None of this stuff happens in the re-entry draft. It's more of a depth kind of find the diamond in the rough that might start for a few games, that might come in off the bench, kind of those depth pieces, and that's exactly what it is, and that's what we're seeing from all these pickups.
Yeah, so it sounds like the Red Bulls were able to renegotiate something with BWP just to keep him as part of the roster, but you saw his production and the injury he picked up this season. Everything kind of was downhill.
Right.
Definitely, they have to move on from BWP, but not a bad. If you can get him at a good deal, keep him on the roster.
Yeah.
Like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. What's a good contract? What's a bad contract? Sounds like they can get BWP on a good contract. Last big move, a name that our Seattle fans are going to know, that our Western Conference fans are going to know. Saad Abdul Salam, formerly of Seattle as a defender, got picked up by FC Cincinnati in the Stage 2 of the re-entry draft. This guy just won an MLS Cup with Seattle. Part of that organization. Had a number of games that he appeared in for them this year. He is 28 years old, so looks to be, again, like you said, more of that depth piece, that spot starter when you need to rest your regular starters or anyone picks up a knock or an injury or something. How do you think he's going to fit in over at Seattle? I feel like Seattle's going to need him to start immediately. I'm sorry, Cincinnati. You're right. Yeah,
they
need him to start.
Need him to start. Yeah, that's Cincinnati's in a rough spot. We all know it.
And most goals conceded in MLS history in a season.
Yeah,
past year.
and they're an expansion team, so I'm not going to take that as end all be all. If you have a team like LA Galaxy throw that stat up, that's a big deal. It's an expansion team, not the end of the world. They'll move on from that. Not a good stat.
I'm gonna say I think it is the end of the world, man. You just had a record worst defense in 25 years of MLS. You just had the worst defense from a perspective of goals allowed. I'd say you can't get any lower than that.
You can't, but it's an expansion team. You move on.
I don't care if you're an expansion team. You can't set negative records like that.
Either way, this guy's going to come in. He's going to start. He's going to be a part of that back line. He's going to make a lot of appearances this season. So, more than just a depth piece here, probably because you're talking about Cincinnati and that bad record that they have.
Right. He's definitely going to jump in, definitely going to start. I would expect him to at least. And if I'm FC Cincinnati, then what's to lose? You're already the worst defense in MLS history. Put him out there, let him do his thing. Use his experience from an excellent Seattle organization to help maybe change a little bit of your culture on the field and in the locker room at FC Cincinnati. So that's what we got to say about Abdul Salam there. With that, I think that's a re-entry draft. That's kind of our player takes, our contract talk. So we're going to take a quick break, hear from our sponsors. Again, thanks to them for letting us do what we do.
Absolutely.
And then in the second half of the show, we're going to talk about a few other transfers and signings and a little bit of league news. So for you RSL, Cincinnati, and Chicago Fire fans, you're going to be especially interested in this. We've got a little bit of an expansion update as well. So stay tuned, and we'll be back after this. Welcome back to the second half of the show, soccer fans. And for those of you watching at YouTube, Mike has gotten his TFC beanie on here. It's getting a little chilly over here in the RV in the Chicago suburbs, so we're rocking the hats. Mike's ready to stay warm and continue the soccer talk. The one thing he did tell me, I have to share this with our listeners, is something along the lines of, I've never tasted butthole, but I feel like turkey pot pie is comparable. Like that was about what I heard when Mike was talking about some of his Thanksgiving leftovers recently. So yeah,
I mean, who puts cranberries in pot pie?
If you have recipes, listeners, for turkey pot pie, or just a good way to have your turkey cranberry, podcast at sonsofapitchsoccer.com or at SOP Soccer. Please let Mike know. We'll forward it on to his wife, and we'll make sure he eats right.
This came from like Whole Foods, man. Like, people pay a lot of money for these things, and it was, oh god, probably a little bit worse since I had to reheat it. But
turkey pot pie.
I can't wait to hit McDonald's after this episode.
All right, well there we go. Unsolicited fast food plugs. All right, as we mentioned, getting into the second half of the show, we're going to talk about a few of the different headlines from around the league. So we had some news come out of Real Salt Lake, and you Western Conference fans, you West Coast people are going to enjoy a little bit of this conversation here. We've got RSL, who has removed the interim tags from Coach Freddie. Whoop, my notes are cut off here. Freddie Juarez, as well as they've removed the interim coach from GM Elliot Fall. They are now the official coach and GM at Real Salt Lake. And what ownership had cited in this, which I completely agree with, Mike, is that they need to have consistency. That's a huge thing in sports franchises. Like, if you're going through coaches, if you're going through your star players, say in the NFL you get a new quarterback every couple years, or if you're flipping managers over in baseball or in the NBA every couple, 3 years, how do you build a program, an identity, a style of play? You can't. And I think it's more true in the MLS than any other American sport. You need consistency. You need a cultural identity and organizational identity and philosophy. And so it's great to see that Real Salt Lake has removed the interim tags, made them full-time GM and coaches. They want consistency. They look to their strong finish from 2019. Did they finish third in the Western Conference?
They did. Yep, they finished third and hosted a playoff game at home. Ended up winning that and then losing to Seattle in the second round of the playoffs at Seattle, the eventual MLS Cup champions. So, look, it was a good turnaround for them, especially after all the craziness that went on with Mike Petke after that Leagues Cup game and whatnot, and all the uncertainty that was going around that franchise at that point. So they did well, and consistency is huge. I mean, this I know as being a TFC fan, the first 7 years of their existence when they went through like 9 coaches and nobody had coached more than like 40 games. You know, it was you cut these guys, then they bring in new players. Then they let guys go, and it's just this constant cycle, and nothing can get done. So I applaud RSL for keeping these guys who did show some results, and we'll see how that works out for them in 2020.
Now, on the player side of things, they re-signed Marcelo Silva, their 30-year-old center back. They didn't pick up his option, so they were free to negotiate a new contract with him. That's what they did, getting some consistency there in the back line. I don't know, Mike, has RSL had more trouble defensively or offensively, would you say, over the last couple of years?
Over the last couple of years, I'd say it probably would be offensively.
Right.
But they've had some decent defense, but
I mean, you've got Nick Raimondo, who's been a stalwart for them at the goal.
Well, and they don't have many more.
I know, that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, he is retired. He is no longer going to be the captain of the defense, so to speak. But you're right. I feel like they've had some offensive inconsistencies. They've had players who have flashed moments of brilliance, but are they going to be able to lock down that defense? So it looks like they're starting to kind of build a little bit of depth and make that defense some of their priority. Especially, and I'm sorry to tell you this, Mike, your guy, Bofo Salcedo.
Bofo, not Bofo.
Your guy, he's more than likely gone from Real Salt Lake. It's all but a done deal that he's going to Pumas of Liga MX. So he'll be south of the border. You can still catch him. They still televise the Pumas games on some of the local stations here. But he will no longer be with RSL, more likely than not. So.
Yeah, with him, it's definitely was expected. You know, a lot of talent, a younger player. You know, coming up as a homegrown. You know, I don't even know how old he is right now. Maybe 22, 21, something like that. The guy has a lot of talent. He was a bright spot for this RSL team. Did not expect to see him in an RSL jersey very long. Figured he would move on, and that's exactly what it looks like is going to happen here. So, 22, I was close.
There you go.
So
we were talking earlier about what makes a good contract, what makes a bad contract. Yeah, Bofo Salcedo looks like a good contract. If they were able to get some return on him from Pumas, good contract. Well played, RSL.
Yeah.
We wish him all the luck in his future endeavors.
Yeah, so a little challenge for our listeners out there. You want to hear something interesting and how Nick and I have grown as podcasters and what how much better we've gotten over the days. Go back to the very, very beginning of Sons of a Pitch Soccer over a year and a half ago and listen to our conversation about Bofo Salcedo and that name and whatnot. We've come a long way, Nick.
Mike didn't realize that it was a nickname and looked up the Urban Dictionary of what Bofo means. We'll leave it at that.
Go find out. Download I think it was like our 4th or 5th episode ever. Now that we're at like 103, 104, whatever we're at now.
Yeah.
And check that out.
Yeah, don't do it with your kids though. Let's talk now a little Eastern Conference here. FC Cincinnati made a decent move here, picking up Haris Medunjanin after he was not signed by Philly. They let him go. Didn't give him any extensions, didn't pick up any options. I don't know if he had an option in his contract or anything like that. But Medunjanin, who's played a really prevalent role for what was the Union's best season, MLS regular season. They won their first playoff game in MLS franchise history, and yet they let this centerpiece of their team go. Why do you think they did that, and what is he going to do for Cincinnati, Mike?
Very surprising move. I did not see it coming. I thought they would really try to retain him because he has been, ever since he came over, they've gotten better. And Cincinnati, that's a good pickup. I mean, the guy has talent. He's great on set pieces. He can really distribute the ball well from the midfield.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a great pickup from Cincinnati's perspective.
A team
What are
who
they going to
couldn't
sign?
connect-
What are they going to
Yeah.
pay for him? How much money is that going to cost? I don't really know because they don't release the terms. But overall, a great pickup for Cincinnati. I was surprised to see that Philly didn't pick him up and
Yeah.
re-sign him something.
A club in Cincinnati who really struggled to link their defense with their offense, who maybe could bend but not break, but never really get out in transition, or when you just need to clear a ball and have someone hold it up and have some possession to relieve the pressure from the defense. Medunjanin's going to be able to do all that for him. And here's a few little numbers and some trivia on Haris Medunjanin. In 2019, he led all MLS players in total passes, total completed passes, passes in the opponent's half, and completed passes in the opponent's half, according to their source, Opta. So that's straight from the MLS. Like, he
Not bad.
is one of the best passers in the league, most prominent passers in the league. Maybe this shifts a little bit more of a style of play change from Jim Curtin and the Philadelphia Union. Maybe this is just they couldn't afford him, or they picking up some other young players they're developing. But yeah, good on FC Cincinnati. Here's another thing that Philadelphia Union are losing in Haris Medunjanin. He played for the Netherlands U21 team, but then made his one-time switch back to Bosnia, his cultural home, and actually played in the 2014 World Cup for Bosnia-Herzegovina. So Philly just decided not to re-sign the best passer in MLS and someone who has World Cup experience. I don't know what that says about Philly, Mike. So unless he had one of those bad contracts that we were talking about, this one's a head scratcher.
Yeah, I can't seem to figure it out. I don't know why you would let the guy go, especially with where this team was in the growing phase. Because let's be honest, they're still growing. They're still getting
Right.
better. They're still on the uptrend. They just won their first MLS playoff game, and then you take a centerpiece like that and not re-sign them. I don't know. I mean, maybe they've got something up their sleeve. Maybe they know what.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't know all the details.
Does he have an injury that maybe the club knows about but doesn't
Right.
need to be disclosed? I don't know.
Maybe some type of bad knee issues or something that we don't know about. I don't know. It's a head scratcher for me. But good pickup for Cincinnati.
Absolutely. Last kind of transfer speculation that we're going to discuss here. Chicago Fire have been linked with Alan Pulido, currently of Liga MX and Chivas de Guadalajara. So the club, Chivas, has announced that Pulido is leaving, but there's been no confirmation to where he's going. All signs point to MLS. And he was originally linked with San Jose Earthquakes
Right.
and Orlando City. San Jose seems like the likely landing spot for him since he played for
Played
Matias
for-
Almeida,
right,
who's
right.
the Chivas coach and who had a couple of pretty good seasons with Chivas. I think they won a couple trophies with them.
Yeah,
in
Champions League
2017
over
and 2018. So,
Yeah.
there you go. I didn't want to bring it up, Mike, but you're
Sure.
right. You're right. But he's also been linked again, San Jose, Orlando, and Sporting Kansas City. Like Kansas City being linked with the high-profile, big money kind of player. Interesting for them. But we all know Chicago, with the rebrand, with the move to Soldier Field, with a large Hispanic population in the area that they want to try to reestablish some sort of connection with as new fans again. He could show up to Chicago, Mike, and it wouldn't surprise me. Chicago's been linked with a lot of Mexican international
Right.
players.
Yeah, that's a signing that if I am Nelson Rodriguez or the front office staff of Chicago Fire, I am doing anything I can to get him over here. Was he spectacular for Chivas? I don't know. I don't follow their league play that much. I
Yeah.
did see him play in the Champions League final back in 2018. He's a good player. He's
Yeah.
a big name for the Mexican national team and the Mexican fan base. So I think that would be a very smart move to have. Obviously, the guys, Liga MX is a better league than MLS. We all know it. We've discussed it. Until MLS can win a Champions League, until they get rid of salary caps and all these stupid rules that we've been talking about.
Which are necessary currently is my opinion. You need to have it to make sure the league doesn't implode.
I don't know about that. That's a
All right,
discussion
that's
for
another one. That's another
Yeah, so I think that he would definitely do well in MLS.
Yeah.
Would he be a lights out, Carlos Vela type, or Ibrahimovic type, or Joseph Martinez type? I don't know if I'd go that far, but I think that's somebody that could get 15 goals in MLS. And for Chicago, having that player, a big-time Mexican national team player that plays for one of the biggest clubs in Mexico, that would be a great signing for Chicago, especially with their new move to Soldier Field and their rebrand of the Latin Kings. I mean, the crown logo that they have.
Yeah, so if you want to hear our thoughts about the logo, go back to last week. But here's a quick summary. We think it's trash. But to just kind of wrap up, Alan Pulido. Again, he played for Matias Almeida, so he more likely is going to go to San Jose than any of these other MLS teams. He's got 12 goals in 18 games for Chivas this season. I think they're on their break right now between the Clausura and Apertura.
Yeah, could be.
He has 5 goals and 13 appearances for the Mexican national team, including a goal against the U.S. back in 2014, and I think that was a 2-2 draw, I want to say, in a friendly match. So I don't think he's playing a big role for Mexico, but has gotten a lot of looks from them over the last several years. The one other thing that I like about him too, played in Greece for a while.
Yeah.
So over in my motherland, played for Leviathekos and Olympiakos. So to Olympiakos, the biggest team in Greece, consistently in the Champions League over in Europe. So the guy's got a decent pedigree. It'd be great to see him in the MLS. Quickly, some other expansion news as we're approaching our hour mark here on our show. Inter Miami, it has been announced, will be playing in the Eastern Conference, as anticipated. But Nashville SC, not FC, Nashville SC Soccer Club, will be playing in the Western Conference. This brings each conference to 13 teams, bringing some balance to the force, balance to the league. I don't know, Mike. Do you have any thoughts on that alignment right now?
It was fully expected, at least from my standpoint, that Nashville would go to the Western Conference. They're in the Western Conference in the NHL. The Preds are in the Western Conference.
Yeah, well, so are the Blackhawks. So I don't know if you want to use the NHL as a good comp. But anyway,
I know, but
anyways,
hear me out. So instead of moving a team from the West to the East, or trying to shake things up from that standpoint now, let's just stick the expansion team in the Western Conference. And we all know that coming in the next few years, the other expansion teams are further west than Nashville. So you take that, instead of moving Chicago or moving SKC again, because they were moved from the east to the west before, and then moving them back to the east, instead of kind of shaking up the apple cart in that sense, put the expansion team there with the thought, and I'm sure they probably already told them, hey, you're going to be in the West for 2 years, and then once Austin and Sacramento and St. Louis come into the league, we're going to shift you back to the Eastern Conference. So at least they know what to expect, rather than a club who's over here, then over there, and then back over here.
Yeah.
So it makes sense from that standpoint. Yeah, I'm a little disappointed because I really want to go see TFC play in Nashville and make a little trip over there, but I might have to wait a little bit.
Well, yeah, I fully expect a realignment in 2022 when Sacramento and St. Louis come in. I mean, Austin the following season, the 2021 season, clearly a Western Conference team. And then, I think Sacramento will come in the West. St. Louis and then Nashville should move to the East. And Minnesota's just kind of be that odd duck up there in the Twin Cities that's going to be in the Western Conference. Do you think it's fair, though, Mike, that you have these expansion teams coming in and throwing off alignment? And I ask you if it's fair because expansion teams typically don't have the best records in their expansion year. So does that favor say the Western Conference, who's going to get to play expansion teams more often? You think that gives them any better advantage in the points or in the standings or anything like that?
Maybe
Or in
slightly.
the shield race.
Right, in the Shield race, maybe slightly over the next 2 to 3 years. But it's not, I mean, right now, you've got one in the East and one in the West. That's going to shake out. Then maybe down the road, if you put all 3 of those teams into the Western Conference and move Western Conference teams like an SKC over, or even Minnesota, move them over to the East, yeah, you've got a more established team coming to the Eastern Conference. You have more expansion teams in the West. But look at the expansion teams recently. We don't know what to expect out of Austin and St. Louis and Sacramento. Are they going to be in LAFC? Are they going to be in Atlanta? Or are they going to be in Minnesota or Cincinnati? Right? So you don't know. They
Yeah.
still could come out, spend a ton of money, and be in Atlanta, who finished, third in the Eastern Conference their expansion year, won the came in second place in the Eastern Conference their second year, and it went on to win MLS Cup. LAFC had the best regular season in MLS history in their second year, was a playoff team their first. You don't know what you're going to get.
Right.
So it's not a big time game changer from that standpoint.
Okay. Well, with that, we want to thank you, all of our listeners, for tuning in, for following us on social media, for writing to us, for supporting us at our Redbubble store, Sons of a Pitch. Get your swag, get your T-shirts, get some holiday gifts. I would really, I don't know if my sister would let me, get Sons of a Pitch T-shirts for my little nephews and let them wear that around to their private school or to any of the events. But yeah, fans, if you like the logo and if you like what we do, check us out on Redbubble. Follow us on Twitter at SOP Soccer, on Facebook at Sons of a Pitch Soccer. Email us, podcast at sonsofapitchsoccer.com. Big thank you to you, because without you bending your ears to us week in and week out, we wouldn't be able to do what we do and have a lot of fun doing it. Especially thank you to our sponsors, Donovan Food Brokerage and Nice Premium Iceland Pure Spring Water. Without your financial support, it'd be really difficult for us to justify to our wives to take off, once a week to do what we do. So we thank you. And for you listeners, if you're in the Chicago area and are in the food service industry, check out Donovan Food Brokerage. And if you listeners are just thirsty, go check out Nice Premium Iceland Pure Spring Water at your local Walgreens. That's what I got to say. Thank you. Hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. Looking forward to the Christmas season and all the other holidays that are celebrated this December. Mike, what do you want to wrap up this week?
Nick, you said it perfectly. I got nothing to say after that. Well done. Thanks, listeners, and we will talk to you guys again next week.